Shalom, and welcome back to Bnei Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this insight and inspiration with friends and family. You look at the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 17, verse 15. Over there, God instructs us, and upon entering the land and conquering it, that one of the first orders of business is to appoint a king. Som tasim alecha melech. Literally translated, you shall certainly place upon you, accept upon you, a king. And this actually is codified as one of the 613 commandments for the Jewish people. However, when we look historically what happened, when they were finally ready to appoint that king, when you look in the book of Samuel 1, chapter 8, verse 5 and on, the people approached the prophet Samuel, who was de facto the leader of his time. He was the one, quote, judging the people. He was leading the people. He was calling the shots. And they approach him and they say, we would like to finally appoint a king. And he got very upset with them. He was angry with them. In fact, when he turns to God, it seems that God is also upset. And God says to him, it's not you that they're rejecting. It's not personal. It's me, that is me, God, that they're rejecting. What's going on here? How do you reconcile these two? Here in the 5 books of Moses, in the book of Deuteronomy, it says that it's an actual virtue. It's a mitzvah. It's a commandment that they need to fulfill. And here, when they're about ready to do so, they get criticized. Samuel gets upset. God gets upset. However, God says, you know what? Go ahead. Do it. Since they asked for it, do it. What's really going on here? You see, a king, a true king, that is a Jewish king, an Israelite king, there are 2 aspects to it. There is the obvious, the political aspect, or this political/social aspect, meaning that he's there in charge to govern the people in a literal sense, to lead the wars, to run the country, the infrastructure, the taxes, the security of the country, both from within and outside of the country. But then there is a much greater role. There's a much more important role to the king, and that is the role of the spiritual leader, the role of that guide, that spiritual uplifting governance. Now, that is the part that the Jews rejected. You see, because that's what they did have in the prophet Samuel. He was their spiritual leader. He wasn't just, or perhaps he wasn't almost at all, a, regular political governor of the Jewish people. Rather, he was their spiritual guide. And that's what he sensed. As soon as they came, if you look at their words and they say, we would like to have a king like all the nations around us. That's not what he wanted to hear. And God confirms it by saying, it's not you that they're rejecting, it's me. They're rejecting the spirituality. They were asking for something less than. They were requesting something that is actually not befitting the true integrity of who they are or who they're supposed to be. They should have been seeking a king, a true king, that can not only guide them, not only govern them in the literal sense, but moreover, or more importantly, direct them spiritually and lift them up and bring them to greater heights, lift them up higher and higher and connect them better and better to God. In fact, if you looked in Samuel 1, chapter 10, verse 23, it describes to us what King Saul, the very first anointed king of the Israelites, of the Jewish people, what he was like. He transformed into some great spiritual being. It doesn't say that he became this big warrior, or he became suddenly this big hero, or suddenly he was this greatest genius in understanding and knowing how to run a country. That is true, that he did know. But what his virtue became, what really stood out, what stands out in the verse, is that he became a head above, but that's in a spiritual sense. He started to prophesize. He felt different. He became elevated. And because he became elevated and the people being connected to him, he was able to elevate the people. This is a very important lesson, because the truth is, especially in our times, it's very, very difficult to really find leaders of true virtue in all regards, in all senses. But what the Torah is teaching us is that it's important not just to look at, what is that person's abilities, somebody who's running for office, somebody who's wanting to lead, what is their abilities only in the literal sense of, quote, running the country, but rather, what is that person's integrity? What are their morals like? What are their ethics like? And in that sense, to try to find the best one that you can find, that in your judgment is not only somebody that bottom line, dollar to dollar can do a good job, but also that spiritually speaking, that person can leave a good impression. That person has integrity. Sadly, it's not always the case that you can find it. But certainly, when it came to choosing a Jewish king, that was something that was really to really be desired, to really have a true sense of connectivity to God through the Jewish king. That's what they should have desired.